This is the second video on Subject-Verb Agreement, and it focuses on intervening elements. Intervening elements are parts of sentences that are positioned between the subject and verb, and they can sometimes cause confusion for writers. By the end of the video, you will know more about some of the things to look out for and how to avoid making errors with subject-verb agreement with sentences that contain intervening elements. First, we will look at negative elements. Romance, not action, is my favourite movie genre. In this sentence, we can identify the verb is and the subject, romance. But between these two elements is the contrasting expression, not action, which is set off by commas. You may see similar sentences without commas, but still, the verb must agree with the positive element. So the rule, when a negative element is placed between the subject and verb, make sure that the verb agrees with the positive element, the subject. For a second example, I have constructed a similar sentence without commas. I would suggest that the easiest approach to checking subject-verb agreement is to locate the verb, the action, which here is deserves, and then to identify the subject, which is the person or thing that is doing the action. Here the question is, what is deserving of the award? And the answer is the comedy. So that is our subject. And not the thriller is an intervening, contrasting element that does not affect agreement. Deserves is therefore the correct conjugation to match the third person singular subject. Now we will move on to look at intervening phrases, specifically prepositional phrases that come between the subject and verb to provide more information about the subject. A prepositional phrase is a group of words that begins with a preposition and ends with a noun, pronoun, gerund, or clause that functions as the object of the preposition. An example: the nominees for Best Picture are from a variety of genres. Again, we start by finding the verb are, or easier here, the entire verb phrase, are from a variety of genres. Then we can ask, what is or are from a variety of genres? The answer, the nominees, is the third person plural subject with which the verb must and does agree. For the Best Picture begins with the preposition for and ends with the noun picture, and is an example of an intervening prepositional phrase, which is providing more detailed information about the subject. The confusion here is often caused by the fact that the object of an intervening prepositional phrase, in our example picture, is placed immediately in front of the verb, and so some confuse it for the subject. So the second rule, make sure that the verb agrees with the subject of the clause, not the object of an intervening prepositional phrase. In a second example, I have constructed a similar sentence, but this time with an auxiliary verb used to form a negative sentence. When we have two verbs, an auxiliary and a main verb, it is the auxiliary that must agree with the subject. In our sentence, the action verb is win, which is made negative using the auxiliary do and the adverb not. So to find the subject, we can ask, what does not always win the most awards? There are two nouns before the verb, movie and nominations. We know that movies win awards rather than nominations, so movie is the subject. Therefore, the auxiliary conjugation does matches the third person singular subject. Nominations is the object of a prepositional phrase that provides further information about, or qualifies, the subject. The prepositional phrase answers the question which type of movies do not always win the most awards. Finally, we will move on to discuss intervening adjective clauses, or relative clauses. A relative clause is a subordinate clause that begins with a relative pronoun. For example, who, which, or that, which functions as its subject, and they also contain a verb. Similarly to intervening phrases, the intervening clause provides further information about the subject. Our first example: the trophy that is presented to the winners is a golden statuette. We can see that the trophy is immediately followed by the relative pronoun that, meaning that what follows is a relative clause which is going to provide further information about the trophy. It makes clear that we are discussing the winners' trophies. That is presented to the winners is the intervening clause between the third-person singular subject of the main clause, trophy, and its correctly conjugated verb, is. Again, similarly to with intervening phrases, elements of the relative clause often confuse writers. Here, the winners, which is the object of a prepositional phrase within the relative clause, appears just before the verb. We must also be careful not to match our main clause verb with other elements of the relative clause, for example its subject or object. So the third rule: make sure that the verb agrees with the subject of the main clause, not an element of an intervening clause. Our next example contains another adjective clause. This time it is a non-restrictive relative clause set off by commas. It is, of course, the awards which attract huge numbers of viewers, meaning those are our main clause subject and verb. The relative clause, which are held every year, provides non-essential information about the ceremony and does not impact the subject-verb agreement. Our final recap: verbs agree with positive subjects rather than negative or contrasting elements. Number 2, verbs agree with the subjects of the main clause rather than the objects of intervening prepositional phrases or elements of intervening clauses. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and click to see more of our videos.